Okay, so maybe you're into video games, movies, or even theater, and you've thought, man, the costumes are so cool. Well, have you ever thought about actually making those costumes?
It's a real job. People do this for a living, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we're diving deep into the world of costume making today, and we've got some really insightful info from RoleCatcher to guide us.
They have this awesome career guide that really breaks down what it takes to make it in this field.
And they don't sugarcoat it either. Like, it's not all glamorous runway shows and stuff, right?
It can be sometimes, depending on what you specialize in, but yeah, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Right. So RoleCatcher, they get into the nitty-gritty. Like, what does a costume maker actually do all day?
And where do they work? What skills do they need? What are the pros and cons?
It's like, yeah, it sounds cool, but what's it really like?
Exactly.
Mhm.
And that's what we're here to uncover.
So let's set the stage a little bit. We're talking about taking that love for design, that fascination with fabric and form.
And those mad sewing skills.
Yes. And turning it into a career where you're creating costumes for, well, pretty much anything you can imagine.
We're talking stage productions, movies, TV shows, commercials, even cosplay and themed events.
The possibilities are kind of endless, which is exciting. But RoleCatcher points out that it's not all about just sewing pretty dresses, right?
Yeah, I mean, sewing is definitely a core skill.
Essential, I'd say.
Definitely essential.
Yeah.
But you also need a deep understanding of things like pattern making, draping, and even things like how a garment moves on a body.
Oh, right, because a costume might look stunning on a mannequin, but if the actor can't move in it.
Disaster. It's got to be functional as well as beautiful.
So you need to think like both a designer and a craftsperson, right?
Totally. And you might be working with all kinds of crazy materials too. I mean, we're talking silks, leather, feathers, maybe even chainmail.
Ooh, chainmail. That's hardcore. Okay, so we've got the basic idea. It's creative, it's technical, it's got a lot of variety. But what about the tech stuff?
Oh yeah, that's where things get really interesting. RoleCatcher actually talks about how technology is changing the game in costume making.
Like how? Give us the futuristic details.
Well, they mention things like 3D printing becoming more and more common.
Whoa, 3D printed costumes.
Imagine printing out intricate armor pieces or even entire garments with custom fits.
That's wild. What else?
They also talk about digital design and how software is being used to create patterns, manipulate fabrics, and even simulate how a costume will move under different lighting conditions.
Wow, it's like the future is N now W.
It really is. And it's only going to get more high-tech from here, which is super exciting if you're into that kind of thing.
So even though it's rooted in traditional skills, technology is adding a whole new dimension to costume making.
Absolutely. It's opening up a world of possibilities for what costumes can be and how they can be created.
Okay, I'm hooked. So we've got this blend of artistry and craftsmanship, plus a dash of cutting edge tech. But how do you actually get started in this field? Like, what are the steps to becoming a costume maker?
That's a great question. There are actually a few different paths you can take.
Okay, lay it on us.
Well, some people go to college or school and study things like fashion design, theatrical costume design, or even technical theater, which gives them a really solid foundation in the skills and knowledge needed.
That makes sense. But what if you're more of a hands-on learner? Is there a way to kind of like learn on the job?
Absolutely. A lot of costume makers start out as apprentices or assistants, learning the ropes from more experienced professionals.
Ah, so it's like a mentorship kind of thing. You're getting that real-world experience firsthand.
Exactly. And that can be super valuable because you're learning those industry-specific techniques and tricks that you might not necessarily learn in a classroom setting.
Right, because there's probably a lot of like, okay, here's how we actually do this on a tight deadline with a stressed out director breathing down your neck.
Exactly. And those are the kinds of things you can only really learn by being in the thick of it.
Okay, so we've got the formal education route, we've got the apprenticeship path. What about those folks who are like, I'm a natural talent, I can sew anything, I've got a closet full of amazing costumes I made myself?
I love those people. Those are my people.
Right. So what's their path? How do they break into the industry?
Well, for them, it's all about building a portfolio.
Ah, so showcasing those mad skills.
Exactly. They need to create a collection of their best work, whether it's costumes they've designed and made from scratch, or even just really impressive alterations and embellishments they've done on existing garments.
Okay, so you've got your portfolio, you've maybe got some experience under your belt, you're ready to start looking for work. What's the job market like for costume makers?
It can be competitive, especially in certain cities like New York or LA, where there's a high concentration of theater and film productions.
Right, makes sense.
But the good news is that there's always a demand for skilled costume makers, and the industry is constantly growing.
Okay, that's good to know. So where do you even start looking for costume maker jobs?
RoleCatcher actually have a ton of resources on this, which is super helpful.
Like what?
Well, they have job boards specifically for entertainment industry jobs, including costume making positions.
Oh, that's handy.
And they also recommend networking like crazy.
Networking, like going to those industry events and schmoozing it up.
Exactly. It's all about making connections, meeting people, putting yourself out there. Because a lot of times those job openings aren't even advertised publicly.
Ah, so it's who you know, not what you know.
It's a bit of both, honestly. You need the skills to back it up, but having those connections can definitely give you an edge.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say you land an interview for a costume maker position. What can you expect? What kind of questions are they going to ask you?
Well, they're definitely going to want to know about your experience, your skills, and your process.
Like, how detail-oriented are you? Can you handle a sewing machine?
Exactly. And they'll probably ask about your knowledge of different fabrics, your ability to work with patterns, and your experience with things like fittings and alterations.
So be prepared to talk shop. And maybe bring some examples of your work, too.
Definitely. A portfolio is key. It lets them see your skills in action.
And it's like, see, I told you I could sew chainmail. Here's the proof.
Exactly. Show them what you've got.
Okay, so you wowed them with your portfolio, ace those tough questions about seam allowances and whatnot.
You've got the job. Time to dive into the world of professional costume making. But hold on. RoleCatcher points out some things they don't always tell you in those glossy job descriptions.
Oh, like what? Spill the tea, what did they leave out?
Well, for one, it's not always glamorous. You might be working long hours, especially close to a show opening or a film shoot.
Yeah, I bet those deadlines are brutal.
Totally. And you might be hunched over a sewing machine for hours on end, or hand-stitching tiny beads onto a costume in a dimly lit corner.
It's not all runway shows and sparkling gowns, then. More like sweat, maybe some tears, and a whole lot of caffeine.
Pretty much. But hey, that's show business, right? And despite the challenges, most costume makers wouldn't trade it for the world.
Because when you see your creations come to life on stage or screen...
Magic. There's no feeling quite like it.
Okay, so you've got to be okay with the less glamorous side of things. What else should aspiring costume makers know about the realities of this career?
Well, RoleCatcher emphasizes the importance of being adaptable and able to think on your feet.
Because
Things change. An actor might rip a seam 5 minutes before they're supposed to go on stage. A director might decide they hate the color of a costume at the last minute.
Oh no. Talk about stressful.
You've got to be able to stay calm and come up with creative solutions under pressure.
So, quick thinking and a well-stocked emergency kit are essential then.
Absolutely. And speaking of essential, let's talk about specialization.
Okay, yeah. RoleCatcher talks about how you can focus on different areas within costume making, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you could specialize in historical costumes, which requires a ton of research and attention to detail.
So you're like a fashion historian, basically. That's so cool.
Totally. Or you could focus on fantasy costumes,
Yeah.
which lets you really let your imagination run wild.
Dragons, fairies, all that good stuff.
Yes. And then there's film and television, where you might be working on anything from period pieces to contemporary dramas to sci-fi epics.
So there's something for everyone, really. And I guess your specialization can even influence where you end up working, right?
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
if you're into theater, you might work for a specific theater company, a costume rental house, or even freelance on different productions.
Okay. And if movies are more your thing?
You'd probably be looking at working for a film studio or an independent costume shop that caters to the film industry.
Gotcha. So we've talked about the different specializations, the different work environments, but what about career progression? Like, how do you climb that costume making ladder?
Well, RoleCatcher does a great job of outlining the different career stages you can expect. You usually start out as an assistant costume maker or a costume technician.
Okay, so entry level, learning the ropes.
Exactly. You're assisting with fittings, helping with alterations, maybe doing some basic sewing or cutting.
Paying your dues, as they say.
Right. Then, as you gain experience and confidence, you can move up to a full-fledged costume maker.
Where you're given more responsibility, like creating entire garments from scratch.
Precisely. And if you're really ambitious and have some leadership skills, you can even aim for those top positions like costume supervisor, costume designer.
Or even head of department. That's the dream, right? Calling the shots, managing a whole team of creative people. But imagine getting to that level takes a lot of hard work, dedication.
Yeah, of course.
naturally.
Yeah.
But RoleCatcher also stresses something else that's super important for career advancement: networking.
Right. Networking.
It's not just about what you know, it's who you know, or at least who knows why you and your amazing work.
Exactly. And the costume world is all about collaboration.
So you meet other costume makers, you learn from each other, you support each other's work.
And you never know when those connections might lead to your next big gig.
Okay, so you're a networking ninja, you're nailing those deadlines, you're basically a superhero with a sewing machine.
Sounds about right.
But how do you stay ahead of the curve in such a fast-paced industry?
Well, RoleCatcher highlights the importance of continuous learning.
Okay, so you can never know enough about fabric, fashion history, sewing techniques.
Exactly. You should always be striving to improve your craft, learn new techniques, and stay up to date on the latest trends.
Because what's hot in the fashion world today might be inspiring the costumes of tomorrow, right?
Exactly. And with technology constantly evolving, there are always new tools and techniques to explore. Like imagine incorporating LED lights into a costume.
Whoa, that'd be amazing. Or using those special fabrics that change color with body heat.
The possibilities are limitless. So, even if you've been a costume maker for years, there's always something new to learn and experiment with.
Which keeps things exciting, right? You're never bored in this job.
Never a dull moment. And that's part of what makes it such a rewarding career.
Okay, so we've talked about the skills, the specializations, the career paths, and the importance of staying ahead of the game. But what about the money? Let's be real. How much can you actually earn as a costume maker?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
Come on, give us the inside scoop.
I wish it were that simple.
Mm.
But the truth is, salaries in this field can vary widely, depending on your experience, your location, your specialization, and even the specific production you're working on.
Okay, so it's complicated.
It is. But don't worry, RoleCatcher provides some helpful salary ranges for different career stages and locations in their career guide.
Oh, good. So we can at least get a general idea.
Absolutely. And they also offer some really practical advice on negotiating your rates and making sure you're being compensated fairly for your work.
That's super important, knowing your worth and all that.
Exactly. You've got to be your own advocate in this industry.
Okay, so while we can't give you an exact salary figure, RoleCatcher can give you the tools and knowledge you need to navigate those tricky salary negotiations.
And let's face it, negotiating a good salary is all part of being a successful professional in any field, right?
Absolutely. Knowing your worth, standing up for yourself, it's all part of the game. But let's move on to something that might be a little less nerve-wracking than talking about money, at least for some people.
Oh, good. What's next?
Let's talk about the interview process.
The dreaded interview.
Okay, so you've sent out your killer resume, your portfolio's top-notch, and you've landed an interview for your dream costume-making job. Congratulations. But now what? What can you expect during a costume maker interview, and how can you prepare to really wow those potential employers? Thankfully, RoleCatcher has some great insights on this.
They do. They actually have a whole section dedicated to interview tips, specifically for creative roles like costume making.
Awesome. So what are some of their top tips?
Well, first and foremost, they emphasize the importance of being prepared to talk about your work in detail.
So, like, be ready to explain your creative process.
Exactly. They might ask you about your inspiration for a particular costume, the challenges you faced, the techniques you used.
And you need to be able to articulate all of that clearly and enthusiastically.
Exactly. Passion goes a long way in an interview.
Okay, so be ready to geek out about your work. What else?
Well, RoleCatcher also suggests having a good answer prepared for that classic question. Tell me about a time you failed.
Ooh, yeah, that one's always a toughie. Nobody likes to talk about their failures.
I know. But it's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes, and interviewers aren't necessarily looking for you to be perfect.
They want to see how you handle challenges, how you learn from your mistakes, and how you bounce back from setbacks.
Exactly. So have a story ready about a time you messed up, what you learned from it, and how it made you a better costume maker.
Okay, good advice. What else do we need to know about acing that costume maker interview?
Well, this might seem obvious, but RoleCatcher stresses the importance of dressing the part.
Okay, so maybe not showing up in a full-on Elizabethan gown, but also not rocking up in sweatpants.
Exactly. Find a happy medium, something that's both stylish and professional.
And maybe something that reflects your personal style as a costume maker.
Yes. Let your personality shine through.
Okay, that makes sense. Dress to impress, but also be authentically you. Any other interview tips from RoleCatcher that we should know about?
One more thing.
Yeah.
Be prepared to talk about money.
Ugh, I was hoping we could avoid that topic. But
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. It's bound to come up.
it always does. So do your research beforehand. Know what the average salary range is for someone with your experience level in your location.
And be prepared to negotiate.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to ask for what you're worth.
Yeah.
And remember how we talked about AI changing the game in costume making? Well, it's also changing the job market itself.
Okay, how so? Is AI going to be coming for our costume making gigs now?
Well, not exactly replacing humans yet. But RoleCatcher points out that more and more companies are using AI to screen job applications.
Wait, really? So, like, robots are deciding who gets an interview?
Kind of, they're using algorithms, basically software, to scan resumes for certain keywords and skills that match the job description.
Whoa. Okay, that's kind of intimidating. So how do you even stand out to an algorithm?
That's where RoleCatcher's insights are super helpful. They give you tips on how to tailor your resume and cover letter to appeal to both human readers and those AI gatekeepers.
Okay, so it's like SEO for your resume. Keywords are key.
Exactly. You've got to use the right language and highlight the specific skills and experience that the algorithms are looking for.
So it's not enough to just be a fantastic costume maker anymore. You've got to be a tech whiz, too.
Well, you don't have to be a tech whiz, but you do need to be aware of how technology is impacting the job search process.
And how to use it to your advantage.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, you want your resume to land on the desk of a real human being who's impressed by your skills and experience.
Right. So let's say we've done all that. We've impressed the AI, we've wowed them in the interview, we've negotiated a fair salary, and we're officially costume makers. What's next? What does the future hold for this field?
Well, that's the exciting part. RoleCatcher touches on some really cool trends that could shape the future of costume making.
Like what? Give us a glimpse into the future.
Well, remember how we talked about technology already having a huge impact?
3D printing, digital design, all that jazz.
Exactly. Well, RoleCatcher suggests that we're only just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Okay, my mind is ready to be blown. What else is on the horizon?
They talk about things like wearable technology becoming even more integrated into costumes.
So, like costumes with built-in lights, sensors, maybe even special effects.
Exactly. Imagine a costume that lights up in sync with the music, or one that changes color based on the performer's emotions.
That's incredible. It's like taking costumes to a whole other level of immersive storytelling.
Right. And it's not just about the technology itself. It's about how costume makers can use those tools to push the boundaries of creativity and innovation.
So maybe we'll see a whole new breed of costume maker emerge, someone who's not just a master of fabric and form, but also a tech wizard.
Exactly. Someone who can bridge the gap between the traditional craft of costume making and the cutting-edge world of technology.
Now that is a career I could get behind. Blending artistry and technology to create something truly magical.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe one of our listeners will be the one to invent the next big thing in costume technology.
Maybe they'll be the one designing costumes for the first colony on Mars. Or for holographic performers.
The possibilities are endless.
This has been so inspiring. I feel like I've learned so much about the amazing world of costume making, and I'm sure our listeners have too.
Me too. It's been a blast.
So, to wrap things up, if you're out there and you're feeling that spark of creativity, that passion for bringing characters and stories to life through the power of costume, don't ignore it.
Absolutely. Embrace that passion. Hone those skills, and who knows? You might just find yourself on the cutting edge of this incredible field.
And don't forget, RoleCatcher has a wealth of resources to guide you on your journey, so go check them out. And until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep diving deep into the things that light you up.